Can you give us a little bit of background about yourself?
I'm a storyteller and a writer, and I was a member of a Quaker meeting for over 20 years. And my activism and my theology are kind of entwined. And I think it has to do with walking lightly on the earth. And I'm probably relatively close to Native American thought, religious thought, in terms of respecting the earth and being a part of it. And that seems to be what my storytelling is about, as well as whatever you want to call it, activism. And it's also, there's a big feminist strand in there as well. I do stories from religious and spiritual traditions, not just one, but from all traditions. Interfaith work has been very important to me for a number of years, and I truly believe that all religions have a grain of truth, a foundation of truth, and that we can learn from one another. And I think that's an important thing for me, that difference is interesting to me and exciting and not threatening. So I have trouble with people who, because I can't understand it, because it is so interesting and so exciting to me to learn about other people and what they believe, and not particularly threatening unless it's an overtly threatening philosophy. But there was something, just things that were in the, you showed that some of the videos last night about Seneca, and some of the things that people said when they feel so threatened. It makes you think funny. And one of the things one of the women said was, somebody said, if we have all these nuclear weapons, we're going to die. And this woman just went, well, we all have to die sometime. And I thought, your brain isn't working. That doesn't mean anything. And if you were confronted with a gun, you wouldn't be saying that. If you had a gun smack in your face, that's not what you would be saying. So I think that it's important for us to think about what we believe. I think that's another important thing for me, is to know what it is we believe. And if you know what you believe and you feel strongly about it, then it's important for you to go out and kind of share that with people. I do some living history, and one of the people that I portray is Matilda Jocelyn Gage, who was among the three most important suffragists of her time, with Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony. And but she got a little written out of the history books, probably because of what she believed. And a lot of that was about religion too, and how religions were strangling freedom of thought, and certainly strangling women and suppressing women. So that's one of the kinds of storytelling I do when I've been to schools and libraries, and anybody who'll have me.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background growing up?
I grew up in the Bronx, New York, and in a nominally Jewish family. Culture was important, very little religion. But I was part of that liberal Jewish movement. My parents were. So I knew, I think, maybe more than some of my classmates about some of the things that went on. And one thing I particularly remember that might be germane to how I ended up at Seneca was the Rosenberg trial. And my father actually knew the attorney for the Rosenbergs. And there wasn't any question that they were being railroaded. Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, who were accused of treason, and actually both of them were executed, I believe, leaving behind two sons. But it made a big impression on me, obviously. I don't remember. If you told me what year it was, I would say probably right, but I don't remember. It must have been the 50s. I was probably not yet in high school then, but I remember it, a lot of talking about it. And you had to believe that, if you were a Jew, you had to believe that it had something to do with that. Even though supposedly that was behind us. And I did not suffer from a lot of prejudice, but I grew up in an extremely Jewish neighborhood. So we were the predominant culture. So I suffered from almost no anti-Semitism in my life. I've heard a few things as recently as a couple of years ago. But for the most part, that was not an influence on my personal life. But when something like that happened, then everybody kind of says, well, yeah, that's probably part of it.
Do you remember when you came into your feminist perspective?
I think that had a lot to do with Quakers too, although I think I had some pretty strong feminist leanings for a while. But Quakers had women's groups and women's worship groups, and I got involved with all of that. So that was a kind of more of an activist time. And I had started going to Quaker things in 1980, I believe, 79 or 80. So when I went, I was at Seneca in 84, just for a few days, not a long time. But that was, I would say there was definitely a connection there. I knew Cindy Sangri, who was, I believe, a member of the meeting here in Syracuse, but I was still living in New York City at that time. So, but I think there was some crossover and some connection in my mind anyway, among all of those things.
So when did you first hear of Seneca?
That I couldn't tell you. I mean, we all, I guess everybody knew about Greenham Common and what was more or less what was going on there. And then we heard that this was happening, and I don't have a lot of memory about how that happened. But I had a few days and a tiny bit of money, and I just thought, well, this would be a good thing, just something. Quakers have an expression called leadings. You know, something is drawing you or calling to you, and it was a leading to go. So one of the memories that I began to have, that I had kind of not been in so much in the forefront, had to do with Judaism. It's an odd connection, but while I was at Seneca, a woman cantor came down with a whole busload of people, not women, but people, men and women, and held a Friday night service outside the gates of or outside the fence of the encampment. And I had never seen a woman conduct a service. And I have a tiny bit of Hebrew because I told you I lived in a very Jewish neighborhood, and I had actually taken Hebrew as a language in high school. So I have a little bit of Hebrew, and I do have a strong identification with Judaism as a culture. So I went, and the thing that I remember was, two things. One was that it was led by this woman cantor, and that was quite wonderful to me. And she seemed to have a lot of emotion with it. If you have ever listened to the broadcasts from one of the large synagogues in Manhattan, the rabbi, and even the women do it too, they just intone, and it is so boring and stultifying, and you just think, oh, God doesn't even want to hear this, you know. But she led the service with a lot of feeling, but the phrase that kept coming around, and I had not realized that this was in so much of the liturgy, is ve'yaseh shalom, and they will make peace. And sitting there in that setting, outdoors, with all of these pretty much strangers, but there were some women from the encampment whom I had, gotten to know a little bit. And hearing a woman do this was a very amazing experience, and that was quite remarkable, and it just made it come to life. The feeling of that this is what God is calling us to do, is to make peace. The other memory that was very pointed was that we did have some kind of, I don't know if they did one a year, but it seems like they have a big demonstration or event. And that's what I was there for. I went up just before that. And I do have slides where they were building a long wooden, like a corral almost, and they decorated it on the sides with posters and banners. And I have the slides for that for you. And I brought, and there was, I remember there was web weaving and all of that. And there was also something we must have done this in Seneca Falls, because I have one of the slides, there's a woman speaking, and behind her there's a sign that says Bloomer House. So I think that must be actually in the town of Seneca Falls. So we had gone there and to do this, and just the way it was in the 1983 demonstration, there was a lot of action and things going on, and women doing different things, and people from the town being upset about it. And I particularly remembered this one man who was very upset with us and very unable to comprehend what it was that we were doing, and he was just pretty angry about the whole thing. And it was because of that incident, and also because of the talking, which we've also done a little bit, about the white deer, and my having heard about the white deer, that I wrote a short story. And I don't have it with me because it never got into it was way before computer days, it never got in there, and now I'm reworking it. But one thing I learned about myself was that I was a lot braver at 40 than I am at 63, because I could never have written this story now. And I always tell people, if it's a movie or a book, I won't read it if an animal dies. And in this, the deer do die at the end. And I couldn't do that now. So I was very impressed with the 40-year-old who was able to write this thing. And I don't think I could read it out loud. I haven't cried yet. I feel myself a little emotional now. I haven't cried when I've read it, but I think if I read it out loud, I probably would. But what it's really about is it comes right back to the thing about what my belief about difference, and how terrifying difference is to some people, whether it's sexual difference or philosophical, political difference. It's just really, really scary to some people. And how tragic the consequences of that can be if you see those who are different as less than, not entitled to even life because they're so different. And this is the history of our country too, isn't it? I was trying to remember those things, and that's where I'm not too helpful, I think, because I don't have a lot. Some of the things that I remember come from the photographs that I took. I had a few when I was looking at the tapes last night. A couple of things kind of like, oh yeah, that looks a little familiar to me. But I think I probably knew most of those songs before I even got to Seneca. But I do associate You Can't Kill the Spirit and the other one, We Are the Old Women. Yeah, those two songs. I think I do associate those with the peace camp.
How did you know those songs before?
Probably from Quaker women. I did a lot of singing with Quakers, so that's where I learned all the goddess chants and everything from Quaker women. I'm laughing because, of course, you're not supposed to personify the deity, or some people would say or sing, but the Quakers do a lot of singing. And the kittens were little. It's almost hard to tell how little they were from these pictures. So this is all the same kitten. They were perfectly comfortable with people, and they got a lot of fussing about. And this one was what I like about this is that there's this mailing that we were all doing, and sitting outdoors and stuffing envelopes apparently. And that's my hooked rug. I used to do a lot of them, and the cup, and I just thought that was the perfect, and the kitten in the middle of it all, and it was just it's a perfect representation of life in the encampment, which is everything is kind of flowing around and everything flows into everything else, and not like an office or anything like that.
Getting the work done in the world we want to live in.
Yeah, I like that. I like that very much, and it always has cats, right, and music, and this, of course, is the other maybe emblematic photograph of this woman. We didn't have a lot of hot showers or any, but you made do and you enjoyed yourself doing it. And I think last night when they showed, there were a lot of crowd shots, I think I saw somebody holding this little girl. I don't remember. It was really quick, but quick glimpse, but I thought I recognized from the photographs, and I believe that they were sisters, but I could be wrong about that. The thing that makes these really good, and I was thinking about this because I've been shooting for a long time and my photographs aren't always this. There were so many that really came out well, and I think it's because I had the luxury of shooting while people were doing things. And it wasn't at a party and people weren't, you didn't have to say smile for the camera. So I had, as I say, the great luxury of being able to photograph. And I have to tell you, these were not shot with any kind of telephoto lens. These were shot with a 35 millimeter camera, outdoors, because I didn't even have a flash at the time. I don't remember what camera I had, but it might have been a relatively decent camera, but it didn't have any frills, extras, no digital, nothing. In those days, you never heard of that. So I couldn't go look at it and say, oh, did this come out well, let's do it again, But as I say, if you look at them, you realize that the people in the photographs don't know, for the most part, that they're being photographed. They're not concerned. And that's why they came out so well. And the other thing was that they were taken at different times, over a period of days. So what I did was just walked around with the camera. And when I saw something that I liked, I shot it. On the slides, you will see that there are some that, of the structures, but usually I tend to photograph people and animals more than landscapes. Especially when there are people around to be photographed. I mean, it depends on where I am or, what I'm doing. If I go to a garden, then I'm going to most likely not photograph the people. I'll say, get out of the way. And I think the other good thing about them is that there's a good variety of things. And you'd see, it's not just women sitting and talking, but women in action and of different kinds. At some point, I don't know if it was when the people from Rochester came or what, but some man came with a dog. And they weren't allowed on the land, but they were outside by the farmhouse, which is where you can go if you're not a woman. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And it was one of these, there was a sweet dog, and he was like big and furry and kind of a dog, and chased one of the cats up a tree. And I managed to make a whole feminist thing out of this male dog who didn't have the good sense to be polite and I don't remember exactly how I figured it all out, but I had, at the time, I had this whole, as I said, apocryphal thing about the difference between men and women, because I was really mad that the dog had chased the poor cat up a tree, and you know, said the dog wasn't any respecter of places, and it made up this whole thing about it. It was just a dog. Now, this is probably a very important person, and I was, and I know it's Andrea, and I was a little surprised that I didn't see more of her last night in any of the films, because I know that she was there for quite a while. Because I remember her, I think, as being my contact there.
84,
yeah. And maybe also it's because she's another New York Jewish person, so we kind of, you know, I felt an affinity.
Yeah.
And we're back to the cats. I think that's pretty much it. I both liked and was frustrated by the lack of identification of the women. And especially in the one where you don't even see who's talking. But I think intellectually, I think that's a good thing. Because it's different, and it's different from any documentary I'd ever seen, where they always tell you who it is. You know, they show you the person and they put a little thing underneath, and that's the way my mind wants to work. It wants to know, well, who is that? But I liked it because I thought, well, it's good. It's the way the encampment was, in a lot of ways. Who you were was not half as important as what you were doing, and what you could contribute. And that stuff is the ways that our minds wants to label, but it doesn't really matter. It shouldn't matter at all. I think that for the women who were there for a short time or a longer time, it meant different things. But it gave us, all of us who knew about it and cared one way or the other, I think it gave us kind of a touchstone. It gave us a feeling that we could be our authentic selves. That we could speak truth to power. That's one of the things that it did. And listening to the tape last night, the stories last night, there were women who said things like, I couldn't believe that there were other women who were carpenters. I thought I was the only one. And to be able to do that, to learn about ourselves in relationship to other women was something I think it must have done. The other thing that I didn't tell you, maybe because I was a little embarrassed and I feel like I probably made something of a fool out of myself, but I believe that as part of the action, I dressed up as Julia Ward Howe. And Julia Ward Howe, I just read this recently on a website, and I thought, oh, it's coming around again another 20 years or so. It just keeps coming up. Was that Julia Ward Howe was the woman who started not Mother's Day, but Mother's Peace Day, and spoke to all the mothers of the world to have tender hearts. And it made me think of that woman last night, one of the women who said, well, there were two different women who both spoke about their children, and one of them said, my sons were going to be cannon fodder, and cried. And that's what Julia Ward Howe was saying all those years ago, in the mid-19th century, about the power of women to speak against war and the necessity for that. And that we were following, all of us at Seneca in very different ways, were following in those footsteps. So I think in the general scheme of things, it's probably not even going to be a blip in the history books. But for those women who knew about it, who went to it, who were touched by it, who knew other women who had been touched by it, it was a big big stone with a lot of ripples.